The planet of Ilara was once a shining example of humanity's expansion into the stars. A thriving colony located on the edge of the known universe, it was a symbol of human achievement. Lush forests, towering cities, and advanced technology working in harmony with nature. Life was peaceful. The settlers on Ilara had no reason to fear the unknown. They believed themselves safe. But that sense of security was shattered in an instant. It started with a strange signal. At first, it was dismissed as a glitch, an anomaly caused by a nearby nebula or a malfunction in the communication systems. But when the signal repeated, its patterns began to change. More frequent, more deliberate. Something was out there, watching. And the settlers had no idea what it was. Then came the first attack. Captain Meridrell, stationed at the Central Command of the Ilara Colony's defense forces, was in the middle of her daily briefing when the first explosion rocked the ground. The windows of her command center rattled, and the lights flickered. A loud alarm blared across the compound, filling the air with urgency. "What's happening?" she demanded, standing up abruptly and rushing toward the nearest console. "Unknown ships detected, ma'am. They've breached the outer defense perimeter," a lieutenant called out. Her heart skipped a beat. The defense perimeter was one of the most advanced in the galaxy. No one was supposed to breach it. But now, here they were. Unknown enemy ships, their dark shapes descending from the sky like vultures. The colony had been caught completely off guard. "Sound the alarms. Activate all defensive systems," Captain Drell ordered, trying to keep her voice steady, even though panic was clawing at her insides. She rushed to the war table where a holographic map of the colony displayed incoming threats. The alien ships were fast, too fast. They swooped down from above, cutting through the sky in synchronized precision. In a matter of seconds, their weapons fired, and the first of Ilara's cities erupted in flames. The sound of buildings collapsing, of people screaming in terror, filled the airwaves. The enemy didn't even hesitate. They came down, fired, and destroyed. It was like watching a predator strike its prey. "Sir, their weapons are beyond anything we've encountered," one of the engineers shouted, frantically typing away at her console. "Shields are failing. Our best defenses aren't even slowing them down. We need to evacuate the civilians." Captain Drell snapped, realizing that there was no hope of holding them off with conventional weapons. "Set the emergency protocol. We can't protect them. Get them underground now." But it was already too late. The alien ships moved with terrifying precision, targeting civilian areas where people were trying to flee. The firepower they unleashed was brutal. Laser beams that cut through entire districts, vaporizing everything in their path. The world's brightest minds had no defense against the unrelenting onslaught of superior technology. The colony's shield generators were overwhelmed in seconds, and the once bustling cities of Ilara were reduced to burning rubble. "Ma'am, the main communications array is down," the lieutenant yelled. "We've lost contact with the rest of the colony." Captain Drell's mind raced. There was only one option left: to warn Earth. If they didn't act now, humanity would lose a critical foothold in the galaxy, and more colonies would fall in the same manner. The invaders weren't just here for Ilara. They were here to wipe out humanity's presence in this part of the universe. They had to know this. Earth had to know. "Send a distress signal. Code Red, Priority 1. Captain Drell ordered, her voice strained with urgency. She stood by as the technician worked feverishly, trying to get the message out. She could only hope that it would reach Earth in time. As the alien ships continued their relentless assault, Captain Drell's team scrambled to defend what little they could. Her hands shook as she watched the map on the holographic table, the red blips of the enemy ships multiplying rapidly, overwhelming every position. There was no way to stop them. The human fleet was too far away to help, and the colony's defenses were nothing compared to the firepower of the invaders. Seconds felt like hours as the city began to burn in the distance. The air was thick with smoke, and the sky was filled with flashes of light as explosions ripped through the landscape. Panic spread through the remaining survivors, but there was no safe place left. As the enemy warships hovered above, they unleashed wave after wave of firepower, systematically decimating the colony. "Ma'am, we've got the signal out. It's transmitting to Earth's command station," the technician reported, his voice hoarse with fear. "It's the last transmission we'll be able to send." Captain Drell took a deep breath, glancing up at the screen that displayed the final image of the colony. Smoke rising from the ruins, ships in the sky circling like vultures, and the fires consuming everything in sight. Her stomach twisted with the bitter taste of helplessness. The message had been sent. It was all they could do. As the last of Ilara's defenses fell, the camera zoomed in on Captain Drell's face. Her eyes were filled with resolve and sorrow. We couldn't save them, she thought. But the last thing she could do was make sure Earth knew what had happened. The alien ships began to retreat, having completed their mission. The colony was gone. Humanity had lost its first major foothold in this part of space, but Captain Drell refused to believe it was over. "We won't let them win," she vowed silently. "We'll make them regret this." And with that, the screen went black, the haunting silence of space swallowing the remnants of Ilara. The cold, silent darkness of space was broken only by the pulsing of distant stars and the hum of Earth's command center. Back on Earth, humanity was in the midst of a quiet but growing panic. The message from Ilara had arrived, but it was too late. The colony was lost. The brief transmission, filled with desperation and fear, was all that remained. Captain Drell's final words echoed in the minds of everyone who had heard it. "Help us." In the war room of Earth's United Military Command, President Evelyn Carter and General Alvarez stood before a massive screen displaying the last known footage of the Ilara colony. The room was packed with military leaders, diplomats, and advisors, all staring at the same image. Burning cities, smoke rising from the ruins, and the shadows of alien ships circling overhead. The room was silent. It was the kind of silence that only came when a terrible realization dawned. Humanity was under threat. "This is unacceptable," General Alvarez finally said, his voice cold with fury. His fists clenched as he gazed at the footage. "Our people are dying, and we are still reacting. We should have been ready for this." President Carter stood still, her expression unreadable. She had dealt with crisis before, but this was different. This was an invasion, an attack on human soil. Earth had never faced anything like this. "Ready for what, General?" she asked, her voice steady but sharp. "We didn't even know these aliens existed. This is a threat we weren't prepared for. But now, we're going to change that." She turned to her military advisors. "What are our options?" "Earth's fleet is small, ma'am," one of the officers said, projecting a holographic display of Earth's space forces. "We have about 50 ships in orbit, mostly defense platforms, with a few older warships. It's nowhere near enough to take on the enemy fleet." "That's not good enough," President Carter said, eyes narrowing. "We need more. We need something to strike back, something massive. The enemy has already destroyed one of our colonies. We're not waiting for them to reach Earth. We're going to hit them first." General Alvarez looked at Carter, his eyes filled with resolve. "We can mobilize Earth's reserves. We have resources. We can build a fleet, one that will strike fear into their hearts. If we're going to make a stand, we do it now. And we do it big." The room buzzed with the energy of new plans being formed, the idea of vengeance fueling the military's determination. A warship fleet, something unlike anything the galaxy had seen before, was humanity's only chance. Transition. The scene cut to several days later, the camera zooming out from Earth as fleets of warships began to assemble in orbit. The vastness of the fleet was breathtaking. Hundreds of ships being constructed and repaired as the desperate war effort began. Massive dockyards in orbit around Earth worked at breakneck speed to assemble the 700,000 warships President Carter had authorized. It wasn't just a fleet. It was a symbol of humanity's refusal to bow down. Inside one of these ships, The Vanguard, Earth's flagship, Admiral Samuel Cross, stood before a room filled with his most trusted officers. The war was no longer a matter of just defending colonies. It was now about striking back with everything humanity had. He looked over the faces of the crew, knowing this would be a battle like no other. "We don't have the luxury of time," Cross said, his voice low but unwavering. "We've been attacked. Ilara's gone. The next target could be Earth. We're going to make sure that doesn't happen. We're going to give them a taste of what it means to mess with humanity." The crew's eyes were steely with focus. These weren't just soldiers. They were survivors of a brutal attack, and they had a mission: to avenge their fallen comrades and protect Earth at all costs. Admiral Cross turned to the holotable, where the movements of alien fleets were displayed. The enemy, mysterious and terrifying, was still a step ahead. But not for long. The new fleet was about to make its move. "The time for defense is over," Cross continued. "We're going on the offensive. It's a one-way trip. We hit their homeworlds. We hit them hard. If they think they can wipe out a colony and walk away unscathed, they're about to learn what happens when you mess with humanity." The camera lingered on the faces of the crew, determined, ready, and willing to fight for their home. Cliffhanger. As Earth's fleet, now numbering over 700,000 warships, began its journey into deep space, heading toward the enemy's territory, a strange transmission flickered onto the communication lines. It wasn't a human voice. The words came in a language none of the fleet's systems could decode. It was followed by a chilling message in broken English. "Your attempt will fail. You will burn like the others." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving an unsettling silence in its wake. The crew of the Vanguard exchanged uneasy glances. The warning from the aliens was clear. But humanity wasn't backing down. They were heading toward the heart of the enemy fleet. And this time, the enemy wouldn't be ready. Ending scene. The final shot zoomed in on Admiral Cross's face as he stood on the bridge of the Vanguard, staring into the endless abyss of space. His voice, calm yet filled with purpose, resonated across the intercom to the entire fleet. "Prepare yourselves," he said, his voice steady but filled with the weight of what was to come. "This is our revenge. And this time, we'll make sure they regret ever crossing us." The fleet accelerated, breaking through the blackness of space, heading straight into enemy territory. The sound of engines powering up filled the background as Earth's vengeance began. The camera cut to black, leaving the tension hanging in the air. The vast fleet of humanity's 700,000 warships now lay in the void of space, moving toward the heart of enemy territory. It was a sight no one had ever witnessed before. Rows of ships, gleaming and ready for war, each one a testament to the relentless determination of humankind. Every ship carried not only advanced weaponry, but also the weight of a people determined to reclaim their future. Admiral Samuel Cross stood at the command deck of the Vanguard, Earth's flagship. His eyes scanned the massive holographic display of the alien fleet that was approaching. The enemy was vast, more ships than humanity had ever imagined. But now, they were coming for them, and humanity would not retreat. "This is it," Cross muttered to himself as he watched the glowing enemy ships draw closer. "We strike now, or we lose everything." "Admiral, the enemy fleet is in range," Commander Isabella Hart said, standing beside him, her face grim. She turned to the tactical officer. "All ships ready their weapons. Prepare for engagement." The moment had arrived. "Fire when ready," Admiral Cross ordered, his voice filled with ice-cold determination. The first wave of humanity's fleet opened fire. Beams of pure energy shot into the darkness, lighting up the space around them with a brilliant, deadly glow. The ships of the alien fleet returned fire almost instantly, but humanity's fleet was faster, more organized. For a brief moment, the two forces collided, a kaleidoscope of destruction lighting the stars. The battle was fierce, brutal, and unrelenting. Explosions filled the blackness of space, sending shockwaves that rippled through the fabric of reality. But the human fleet, despite being outnumbered, was better equipped and more determined. The first salvo of shots from humanity's warships tore into the alien forces, destroying several ships in a single blow. "Admiral, we're holding our ground," Commander Hart shouted, her hands flying over the controls as she watched the battle unfold. "We're pushing them back." But it wasn't enough. The enemy was far from defeated, and they had tactics that humanity hadn't anticipated. The alien ships began to form new formations, adapting quickly to humanity's strategy. Smaller, faster ships darted through the chaos, targeting vulnerable points on the larger human warships. "The enemy is using hit-and-run tactics," a tactical officer yelled, his voice urgent. "They're exploiting our weaknesses." Admiral Cross's eyes narrowed. The aliens were relentless, circling and attacking from all sides. They moved like predators, their ships designed for speed and precision. But the human fleet was not going to give in so easily. "Divert all power to our shields," Cross commanded, "and get those smaller ships into position. We're not letting them break through." The battle raged on, and the outcome remained uncertain. The human fleet fought with everything they had, but the enemy was too clever. For every alien ship destroyed, 2 more seemed to appear, and their attacks were only growing more coordinated. It became clear that the true test of humanity's strength would be the final push, the strike against the heart of the alien fleet. The Oblivion, the flagship of the enemy forces, hovered ominously in the center of the battle. It was a massive ship, a behemoth of metal and firepower, and it was the brain of the alien assault. Destroying it would cripple their entire fleet. But the question was, could humanity's fleet break through their lines and land a decisive blow? Tension builds. Admiral Cross knew the risks. Every ship in his fleet was in danger, and they were running out of time. They had to act fast, or the aliens would overwhelm them. He made the decision. "Prepare the Vanguard for a direct assault on the Oblivion," Cross said, his voice steely with determination. "We're going to target their command center. It's now or never." The crew exchanged nervous glances, but none of them hesitated. The Vanguard was the most advanced warship humanity had ever created, and it was about to face the most dangerous mission of its life. If they could break the enemy's flagship, the entire invasion would lose its heart. The massive warship, the Vanguard, surged forward, its engines roaring as it pushed through the chaos of the battlefield. Alien ships attempted to surround it, but humanity's fleet, having regrouped, formed a protective barrier around their flagship. The smaller ships darted in and out, engaging the enemy in close combat, allowing the Vanguard to advance toward the Oblivion. Admiral Cross gritted his teeth. The enemy wasn't making this easy. Their fleet continued to swarm, firing relentlessly. Explosions rocked the Vanguard, sending shockwaves through its hull. The ship groaned as the shields took hit after hit, and alarms blared across the deck. Crew members scrambled to keep the ship intact as they barreled toward the alien flagship. "Captain, shields are down to 30%. One of the officers shouted. "We can't take much more." "Hold steady," Cross barked. "We're almost there." The distance between the Vanguard and the Oblivion shrank with every second. The enemy flagship loomed large in front of them, its weapons unleashing streams of energy that lashed out at the human ship. The Vanguard's shields flickered as the firepower intensified. Yet, the ship pushed forward. Cliffhanger. With a final, bone-rattling jolt, the Vanguard broke through the last line of defense and came within striking distance of the Oblivion. The alien flagship's shields were starting to falter under the weight of humanity's attacks. But then, just as it seemed they would land the final blow, the screen flashed red. A new wave of enemy ships appeared from nowhere, countless reinforcements, coming out of a nearby asteroid field. The numbers were overwhelming. "Admiral," Commander Hart cried, "we've been surrounded. We can't fight them all." The camera zoomed in on Cross's face, his expression hardened. This wasn't over. "Not yet. All ships," he ordered, "focus fire on the Oblivion. We break their command ship, and we break their will. But with every passing second, it became clear that the fate of humanity's fleet hung by a thread. The next few moments would determine whether humanity could survive this unrelenting onslaught, or be consumed by it. The vacuum of space seemed to hold its breath. The battle raged around the flagship, the Vanguard, as it faced the brutal might of the alien reinforcements. The air was thick with tension on the bridge as the warships of Earth's fleet fought with everything they had to hold their ground. Yet the enemy seemed relentless, as if the very fabric of space was against them. Despite humanity's efforts, they were surrounded on all sides, their victory slipping further out of reach. Admiral Samuel Cross stood at the helm, his hands gripping the edge of the command table as the status reports flashed across the holo display. The situation was grim. The reinforcements had arrived in greater numbers than anticipated, far more than even the might of Earth's 700,000 warships could match. "Admiral, we can't hold them off for much longer," Commander Isabella Hart said, her voice tight with desperation. "The fleet's taking heavy fire. We're losing ships. If we don't do something now, we'll be wiped out." Cross's eyes scanned the chaotic battlefield. The alien forces had formed a nearly impenetrable wall of ships, their tactics expertly honed. They had adapted to humanity's strategy. The odds were now stacked heavily against them. "Admiral, we've lost contact with 4 more battalions," reported another officer, his tone laced with urgency. "They've been overwhelmed." A heavy silence settled over the bridge. Cross knew the reality of the situation. No matter how much they fought back, the enemy was still coming, pushing forward like an unstoppable tide. But then, the fire in his eyes flared to life again. He knew this was humanity's moment of truth. They had one last chance to tip the balance in their favor. "Prepare the Vanguard for a final assault," Cross ordered, his voice grim but resolute. Hart's eyes widened. "Admiral, you mean a direct strike against the Oblivion, with everything we've got?" Cross nodded, his jaw clenched. "If we can take down their flagship, their entire fleet will lose their leadership. The rest will scatter. We can break them. This is the only way." The final push. As the crew worked to prepare the Vanguard for the final assault, the remaining ships of the human fleet regrouped, forming a tight formation around the flagship. It was now or never. Their chances were slim, but it was the only shot they had left. "We're going to need every ounce of firepower we have," Cross said, his gaze never leaving the holographic display of the Oblivion. It was an enormous ship, a fortress in space, its weapons bristling with deadly energy. But it was also the heart of the alien fleet, and that was its vulnerability. "Engage all main cannons," Cross ordered, his voice like iron. "Fire everything we've got." The engines of the Vanguard roared to life as it surged toward the enemy flagship. The human fleet followed, launching a final barrage of weapons at the alien ships blocking their path. For a brief moment, the skies were lit with the flames of battle, and the sound of explosions reverberated through the vast emptiness of space. But it wasn't enough. The alien ships pressed forward, undeterred, their weapons firing in devastating waves. The Vanguard rocked under the impact, its shields flickering under the weight of the enemy's assault. Yet, the Vanguard pressed on, its guns blazing with ferocity as it cut through the heart of the alien armada. "We're taking too much damage," a tactical officer yelled, his voice strained as he looked at the rapidly depleting shield readings. "The shields won't hold much longer." Admiral Cross didn't flinch. His mind was set. He knew they were running out of time. "Just a little further," he muttered, clenching his fist. "Push forward. We cannot stop now." Climax. The final confrontation. The distance between the Vanguard and the Oblivion closed rapidly. The flagship of the alien fleet loomed ahead, an intimidating fortress of firepower and metal. The human fleet poured every ounce of energy into holding the enemy back, creating an opening for the Vanguard to strike. "Brace for impact," Commander Hart called out as the bridge shook violently from another barrage of alien fire. The Vanguard pushed forward through the cloud of debris and wreckage, its weapons firing relentlessly at the alien ships trying to prevent their advance. The enemy flagship fired back, launching a massive pulse of energy that tore through the darkness. The Vanguard's shields shimmered under the force of the blast, but they were quickly failing. "We're losing power," an engineer screamed. "We're down to less than 10% on the main reactors." The crew was in chaos, but still, they pressed forward. With the alien forces closing in on all sides, the Vanguard launched one final, all-out assault, pouring every ounce of power into its weapon systems. "Fire everything," Cross shouted, his voice booming over the comms. The Vanguard's cannons blazed, sending a torrent of energy toward the Oblivion. For a brief, horrifying moment, it seemed as though the shots might miss. But then, with a resounding crack, the enemy flagship's shields faltered. One final, devastating shot hit its core. The Oblivion shook violently, its entire hull splintering. The alien flagship erupted in a massive explosion, the force sending shockwaves throughout the battlefield. The remaining alien ships staggered, their once imposing formations faltering. Victory. The aftermath. The explosion of the Oblivion was the turning point. The alien fleet, leaderless and in disarray, began to retreat. The remaining ships of Earth's fleet pressed the attack, pushing back the alien forces and driving them toward the edge of the solar system. Admiral Cross watched from the bridge as the alien ships broke formation and scattered, their retreat a clear sign that the battle had been won. But even as the alien forces fled, the cost of the battle was undeniable. The human fleet had taken heavy casualties. "We did it," Commander Hart said, her voice filled with awe and disbelief. Cross nodded, his face weary but resolute. "Yes, but this war is far from over." The camera panned across the bridge of the Vanguard, where the crew stood, exhausted, battered, but victorious. Their mission was complete, but the cost had been high. As the battle subsided, Earth's fleet stood in the midst of the wreckage, alien and human alike, its ships battered, but its spirit unbroken.